Okay, let's unpack this. I want you to picture, the most famous story in Western history.
Mhm.
The story of Jesus. The beats. The manger, the shepherds, the robe, the sandals, the hill outside Jerusalem. You got it.
It's an image that's pretty deeply ingrained in the cultural consciousness,
Yeah.
regardless of what you actually believe.
Right. Now, I want you to take that image and just throw it out the window.
Right.
Instead, I want you to imagine the nativity scene didn't happen in the Middle East. Imagine it happened in, well, Bethlehem, Pennsylvania.
That is certainly a choice.
And imagine that instead of robes, everyone is wearing like leather trench coats. And instead of Roman centurions, you have this futuristic, dystopian police force.
Right.
And the whole thing is set to a rock opera soundtrack that sounds like it just fell out of a time capsule from
2003. Oh, yeah.
Exactly, from 2003.
You're painting quite the picture. We are, of course, talking about the project known as Hero. And we have to emphasize that the exclamation point is at the beginning of the word.
It's vital. It's not just hero, it's hero.
Yeah.
It just screams early 2000s excitement.
It really, really does. It's a very specific artifact of its time.
So here's the mission for this deep dive. We are looking at a project that came out in 2003, which attempted to answer a really wild what-if question.
Mm-hmm.
What if Jesus was born in the USA, specifically in the Rust Belt, and grew up to lead a revolution in, like, cyberpunk New York City?
It sounds like fan fiction when you put it like that. But this was a massive production.
Oh, it was huge. The sources we're looking at today are clear that this wasn't just an album, it was a multimedia universe.
Right.
We're talking about a rock opera, a nationwide tour, a DVD release, a trilogy of novels, and this is my personal favorite, a series of comic books.
And what makes this deep dive so interesting, beyond the letter coats and the rock music, is that it is a fascinating study in adaptation.
How so?
Well, the creators took these ancient texts, the Gospels, and tried to forcefully transpose them onto a near-future setting to make them feel immediate.
The sources keep using the phrase street smart. They wanted a street smart retelling.
Which is really just code for modern, gritty, and urban. They wanted to strip away all that historical distance.
Yeah.
And if you read the Bible, it feels like ancient history. If you watch Hero, it's supposed to feel like watching the evening news in a dystopia.
So before we get into the wild casting choices, and believe me, the cast list is insane.
Mm-hmm.
We need to understand the world they built.
For sure.
Because reading through the background lore, this is not the New York City we know. This place is terrifying.
It is. They didn't just change the costumes, they changed the geopolitical reality of the entire Earth. The source material describes the setting as a near-future dystopic Earth.
Right.
And the whole planet is under the thumb of a global government called ICON.
Which stands for the International Confederation of Nations.
Exactly. And, in a lot of sci-fi, a global government might be a good thing. Like in Star Trek, you've got the Federation. But here, the text explicitly states that ICON rules with an iron fist. It's a totalitarian regime that controls everything.
And here's where it gets really specific to the genre. ICON hasn't just taken over the economy or the military. They've gone after culture. Specifically, they've wiped out almost all religion worldwide.
And that is a classic trope in that Christianity versus the government genre of fiction.
Totally.
The idea is that the state sees faith as a competitor for loyalty, so they just eliminate it. The sources note that nearly all faith systems are gone, replaced by allegiance to ICON.
But there's a loophole, and I love how specific this detail is. The summary mentions that while most religions are gone, Judaism is the only ancient religion that survives and flourishes.
As much as it can under this regime.
Yeah, as much as it can.
It's a necessary plot device, really.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to retell the story of Jesus, you need the Jewish context.
Yeah.
You can't tell that story without the prophecies and the cultural background.
Right.
But since they moved the geography to America, they had to move the religious center, too.
Right. There's a note here that says there's only one synagogue left in existence. And where is it?
It's in Brooklyn.
Of course it is. So in this world, Brooklyn is basically the new Jerusalem.
In a narrative sense, yes, it becomes the center of the spiritual conflict. But it's not a nice place to live. The source describes New York City in this timeline as a police-occupied war zone.
Police-occupied war zone. I mean, that is a heavy description.
Well, it reflects the anxieties of the time. Remember, this is 2003. We're post 9/11. The idea of New York as a target or a place of conflict or under heavy security surveillance was very real in the cultural psyche.
Serial just takes that anxiety and dials it up to 11.
Totally.
So you've got ethnic gangs fighting in the streets, you've got these small revolutionary groups trying to fight back against ICON, and the police are just cracking heads.
It sets the stage for a very high-stakes narrative. This isn't a peaceful countryside where some teacher is walking around giving sermons.
Yeah.
This is a powder keg. And into this powder keg steps our protagonist.
Okay, let's talk about the protagonist and the cast in general. Because if you were following the Christian music scene or CCM in the early 2000s, this cast list is like the Avengers assembling.
It is effectively a supergroup.
Yeah.
The producers didn't hire random actors. They went out and got the front men of the biggest bands in the genre to voice these characters.
Leading the charge, playing the character named Hero, who is the Jesus figure, we have Michael Tate.
A massive name. I mean, for context, he was 1/3 of DC Talk, which was arguably the biggest act in that world in the 90s, and later became the lead singer of the Newsboys.
Right.
He has this very powerful, soulful pop rock voice. Casting him just signals that this is going to be a polished, big-budget production.
And then you have the supporting cast, and this is where the adaptation choices get really fun. They didn't just move the setting, they localized the names to sound more New York.
Well, that's a key part of the street smart strategy.
Yeah.
If you have a guy in a trench coat named Simon Peter, it just feels anachronistic. It breaks the immersion. So in Hero, Peter becomes Petrov,
And he's played by Mark Stewart.
who is the lead singer of Audio Adrenaline. He had this really raspy rock and roll voice. It fits the character perfectly. Petrov isn't a fisherman. In this version, the disciples are usually depicted as part of the street element.
And then you have Mary Magdalene, who becomes Maggie.
Played by Rebecca St. James.
Yeah.
Again, huge star power there. She was basically the pop princess of that era.
Right.
And Maggie sounds like someone you'd meet at a diner in Brooklyn. It grounds the character.
It's clever, if a little on the nose. Like Judas Iscariot becomes Jude.
Jude works well, though. It sounds contemporary. Hey, have you seen Jude?
Huh?
Sounds natural. Have you seen Judas? Sounds like a Bible study.
True. But the one that made me laugh in a good way is the antagonist. We have the chief rabbi, who represents the religious establishment that opposes Hero. In the Bible, that's Caiaphas. In Hero, his name is Kai.
Efficient.
Very efficient. And Kai is played by John Cooper.
Explicitly mentioned in the sources, John Cooper from Skillet. Now, Skillet is a hard rock band. They got really huge later on. But even then, they had an industrial, heavy sound. By casting him as the villain, they're using that aggressive vocal style to characterize the opposition.
It codes the religious establishment as industrial and threatening.
Exactly. And Kai isn't working alone. He's conspiring with the secular authority. In the biblical text, you have the Roman Empire. Here, you have Police Chief Devlin.
So instead of a centurion, you have the chief of police of a dystopian NYC.
It maps perfectly.
Okay.
You have the religious leader, Kai, and the law enforcement leader, Devlin, working together to maintain order against this new revolutionary threat.
But there is one character who is unique to this telling. He's not in the Bible. He serves as our guide into this world.
Right, the narrator.
Yeah, the narrator is a guy named Agent Hunter, played by Paul Wright.
This is a fascinating narrative device.
Mhm.
Agent Hunter gives the whole thing this kind of noir detective story vibe. His backstory is that he is a former ICON agent. He was part of the oppression.
Right. The text says he met Hero, joined him, and was thrown in prison.
So the entire opera is framed as his flashback. It's a testimony from inside a prison cell.
Oh, interesting.
I used to be one of them, then I met this man, and now I'm here. It adds a layer of mystery and grit that a standard third-person narration wouldn't have.
Okay, so we've got our cast of rock stars. We've got our dystopian Brooklyn. Let's look at the actual story arc. We started with that hook about Pennsylvania. How does that actually play out?
Well, according to the source, Hero is born in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
But because the world is in chaos, remember, it's a war zone, his family is forced to flee.
So the flight to Egypt from the original story becomes a flight from Pennsylvania to the Jewish slums of Brooklyn.
Correct. They flee to the only place where their culture still exists. He grows up in this enclave in New York.
And then, just like in the original narrative, he disappears for a while, grows up, and starts his public ministry. But since he's in this police state, his message hits differently.
Yeah, the source says he begins to preach and teach the principles of Christianity to the people of New York. Specifically, he's teaching people to love their enemies and care for each other.
Which honestly sounds nice and fluffy, but in a totalitarian regime, telling people to love their enemies is basically treason.
It is incredibly subversive. If ICON rules by fear and division pitting gangs against each other, isolating people, then a message of universal love creates unity.
And unity is the one thing a dictator cannot tolerate.
Exactly. The authorities immediately view him as a revolutionary.
So they aren't just worried about his theology, they're worried he's going to start a riot.
In a way, he is a riot of kindness, maybe, but a disruption to the order nonetheless.
And that sets up the conspiracy. Kai and Devlin team up. They find their snitch, Jude.
Who betrays Hero to them. In this urban setting, it feels very much like a confidential informant turning on a gang leader.
Now, we have to talk about the climax, because this is the part of the deep dive where I really need you to visualize what the creators did. We know how the gospel story ends. It ends with the crucifixion. But you can't exactly drag a wooden cross up a hill in a sci-fi city. It wouldn't make sense.
No, it would look totally out of place. So they made an adaptation choice that is probably the most striking image in the entire production. The source quotes a review from CCM magazine that highlights this detail.
What'd they do?
The execution takes place on a corner street sign.
A street sign, like a walk, don't walk metal pole on a street corner.
Exactly. Hero is executed on a street sign.
That is visceral.
It is. It recontextualizes the symbol entirely. I mean, over 2,000 years, the cross has become jewelry. It's on steeples. It's gold. It's silver.
We've sanitized it.
We've totally sanitized it. By turning it into a street sign, a piece of dirty urban infrastructure, it forces the audience to look at the brutality of the act again.
It anchors the divine and the mundane. It's happening right there on the corner while traffic goes by.
Precisely. It suggests that this sacrifice isn't happening in some holy, set-apart place. It's happening in the gutter, essentially. It fits that street-smart mission perfectly.
And then, obviously, the story doesn't end there. You have the resurrection.
Yes. But even the resurrection gets the street-smart treatment. The source describes the scene where Hero returns in victorious, sin-conquering glory. But note who he goes to see.
The text calls them his hip street friends.
Hip street friends. I love that phrasing. It dates the project so perfectly.
It really does. It sounds like a marketing executive wrote it.
It probably did. But the CCM magazine review, which came out in January 2004, was incredibly positive about this scene. They described it as an epic climax capable of inducing chills.
So despite the potentially cheesy terminology, the emotional beat landed.
It seemed so. They said it was capable of softening the hardest of hearts. So as a piece of theater, it worked. It delivered the emotional payoff.
We've talked about the story and the look, but we haven't really dug into the sound. We called it a rock opera, but that's a broad term. I mean, The Who did rock opera, Phantom is an opera. What are we listening to here?
It was a sonic melting pot. The source lists a mix of rap, rock, pop, dance, and Broadway-style tunes.
That is a lot of ingredients in the blender.
It is. But it reflects the diversity of the city they were trying to portray. If you're in New York, you hear everything. You hear hip-hop, you hear rock, you hear club music.
Right.
Hero tried to capture all of that.
So you have Michael Tate doing his smooth pop rock thing, you have John Cooper screaming industrial metal, and then you have rap battles.
There were rap elements, yes. It was trying to be everything to everyone. And that leads us to a specific term used in the review, seeker-friendly.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about that. Seeker-friendly sensitivity. That sounds like industry jargon. What does that actually mean here?
In the context of that subculture, a seeker is someone who isn't a Christian but is curious or, looking for answers. Seeker-friendly means art or events designed to be accessible to those people. It means lowering the barrier to entry.
So no Latin chanting, no insider theology that requires a degree to understand.
Exactly. They wanted this to be something you could show to a friend who loved The Matrix or X-Men, and they would get it. They wouldn't feel like they were in the church service. They'd feel like they were watching a cool sci-fi musical that just happened to be about Jesus.
Hence the leather trench coats and the comic books.
Hence the entire universe. We mentioned the comic books earlier, but it's worth circling back to. The source mentions a trilogy of novels and a series of comic books released alongside the album.
Comic books feel like the most natural fit for this, honestly.
They do. The structure of the story, a special individual with a mysterious origin, fighting an evil global organization, ICON, with a secret base in Brooklyn. It's superhero logic.
It basically is a superhero origin story.
Even the title, Hero, positions him not just as a savior in the theological sense, but as a hero in the action-adventure sense. It's commodifying the narrative into a format that a generation raised on Marvel and DC would intuitively understand.
And for those who couldn't catch the live tour, because this thing did tour arenas, they released a DVD.
Filmed at the Star Plaza Theater. So we actually have a visual record of the street sign execution and the whole dystopian set design.
So when we step back and look at Hero more than 20 years later, what are we looking at? Is it just a weird piece of nostalgia?
I think it's more than that. It's a fascinating cultural artifact. It represents a specific moment where that community was trying very, very hard to be relevant.
They didn't want the story to feel like a dusty museum piece.
Right. They looked at the culture around them, which was obsessed with the near future, with dystopias, with urban grit, and they said, our story belongs here too.
It's ambitious. You have to give them that. Taking a story from antiquity and putting it on a street sign in Brooklyn is a big swing.
It is. And whether you think the hip Street Friends dialogue ages well or not, the core idea is compelling. They identified that people were feeling anxious about the future, about government control, about war, and they tried to answer that anxiety with their hero.
It's a time capsule of 2003 fears and 2003 hopes. So here's a thought to leave you with. Hero imagined a near future from the perspective of 2003. They predicted a world of total surveillance and global control.
And in many ways, we are dealing with issues they predicted just in different forms.
Right. But their version was very physical, police on corners. Our version is digital, algorithms and data. So if this story were retold today, if you want to reboot Hero for our current version of the near future, what would it look like?
That is the question. What does ICON look like in the age of AI? Is the oppression a guy with a baton, or is it a social credit score?
And where would Bethlehem be? If the margins of society aren't in a steel town in Pennsylvania, where are they? Where would a modern hero have to be born to be truly on the outside looking in?
That's a powerful thing to mull over. The story remains the same, but the setting always tells you what a society is afraid of and what it thinks it needs.
Thanks for taking this trip back to the leather-clad days of 2003 with us.
It was a pleasure to explore the archives.
We'll catch you on the next deep dive.